that her
All right. Good evening, YouTube. I am Mrs. Dave the lawyer, Jacqueline Leah, and tonight we are picking up where we left off from last night. We started streaming a House subcommittee meeting that actually addresses a whole bunch of different topics. The one topic that I think is very interesting is insider trading. We got through about an hour and 5 minutes last night. We didn't get to the insider trading. We didn't get into the insider trading yet. So more to come. But I have to say, I was a little bit nervous about streaming this because I've never streamed this particular subcommittee. I thought it could be like a little bit boring, but it was very interesting. It was various Congress people that we don't normally view when we do like Senate, obviously Senate hearings, but like judiciary and oversight and some of the more popular committee meetings. So it was really nice to see, other people in action, hear their point of view. And I also have to say, the people in the chat just were very interactive. We're giving great feedback. That's really one of the things that I love most about live streaming on YouTube is the live chat. So I can be in there with you. Like if you ever see me on my phone, it's not because I'm like texting somebody else. I'm actually in the live chat interacting with you guys. I switched it up in my studio where I literally mounted a screen right in front of me so I can watch everybody's comments and interact with you guys in real time. So let's get started. I have it teed up where we left off. And remember, double tap. Don't forget to double tap and like the stream. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. And we also have some new membership levels. So take a look at the bio and you can see those memberships as well as some other interesting links. Let's go.
son is still required to go to specialists multiple times per year, doesn't know if she's going to be able to pay for it. She's doing $5 a month under the silver plan of the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, I remember where we left off last night. I didn't even want to listen to the rest. So right now they're talking about the Affordable Care Act, specifically, health insurance for people under 65. Now, the narrative that the left likes to say over and over and over is that the right and Trump's administration has gotten rid of health care for millions of people. And I really don't like that narrative because it's not true. I'll just give you a quick little reiteration, but basically back during COVID lockdowns, we passed a bill called the American Rescue Act. And one of the key things in the American Rescue Act was it expanded Medicaid and it gave heftier subsidies for people that qualified due to income. This expansion was only meant to be temporary. And the reason it was meant to be temporary was because we were literally locked down. A lot of people couldn't work, and Congress wanted to make sure that they had some help. The problem is that it has continued for, I think 3 or 4 years. I'm not 100% sure when it was passed. I believe it was 2021. But last fall, when we had that one of the longest in history, government shutdown, that was the thing that the left and the right were going back and forth with. But it was never meant to be permanent. And the biggest issue that I've seen because of that American Rescue Act and expanding Medicaid and, subsidizing people is that insurance carriers have really taken advantage of that, knowing that they could jack up the premium and that was okay because the government was giving all these subsidies. The government is us, though. We're the taxpayers. We're funding it. So, people had zero premium plans or very inexpensive plans, but they really weren't inexpensive. They weren't discounted or anything like that. Our taxpayer money was just paying the premiums. And now the premiums have just skyrocketed. Like crazy amounts. Like you're talking about $1,000 plus for an individual, $2,000, $3,000. I've seen premiums up to close to $9,000 on the marketplace for a family of 6. It's kind of crazy. But in my opinion, the issue isn't the taxpayer needs to subsidize Obamacare more. We really need to address the elephant in the room that these insurance carriers have really taken advantage of the United States citizens, and that the premiums just need to go down. That's the problem. But we're never going to hear that from these guys in Congress. And the reason for that is because the insurance industry has deep pockets, a billion, trillion-dollar industry. And let's be honest, both sides of the aisle, both left and right, they take donations, PAC money, and lots of money from the insurance companies and from PACs and lobbyists. So I wish that they would just tell the truth, but they have a vested interest not to tell us the truth because literally they're being funded by these big insurance carriers. But let's get started.
Because of the Republicans' actions in these budget bills, her premiums are going up to $1,275 a month.
I'm not Laura Loomer.
She talked about the fact that she can't sleep at night,
but Laura Loomer
that she gets short of breath when she thinks about it, that her son is still required to go to specialists multiple times per year, doesn't know if she's going to be able to pay for it. She's doing everything right. She's playing by the rules. But the policy decisions coming out of the House Republicans and coming out of the Trump administration, they are giving millions of dollars to the richest corporations and people in this country, and they are yanking health care.
This is my problem with these statements, because they're accusing the right of giving billions of dollars to these big corporations, but that is literally what he is asking us to do. He is asking us, the taxpayer, to continue to subsidize the Affordable Care Act so we could then put billions, if not trillions of dollars into the pockets of big insurance companies who are literally billion and trillion dollar companies. That is my problem with when they make this statement, because they're doing that. They're just giving you a sob story, an emotional story, so you think that, Trump and the right is bad. Maybe the right is putting money into billionaires' pockets, but they're literally doing the same thing. They're just asking you, the taxpayer, to do it for them. They don't care. It's different. A tax cut, paying less taxes, is different than asking the taxpayer to subsidize an insurance premium that goes directly to the pockets of these big insurance companies. So I wish that they could just be honest, but I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Care away from people who are trying to make their way every single day, doing it the right way. There are so many stories about this. I had a guy call me just a couple of weeks ago. His health insurance premiums gone up by $1,000. This doesn't mention the fact that already in Louisville, a birthing center has announced it's going to close, that the Lee's Specialty Clinic was at the verge of closure because of the Medicaid cuts that are going into effect. This is going to impact the Kentucky Hospital Association. This is not some flaming liberal group, by the way. They have projected that 35 rural hospitals in Kentucky could close because of these Medicaid cuts.
And there is nothing in today's proposed budget reconciliation that addresses any of these issues that you're talking about, correct?
None of this whatsoever. In fact, I was listening to the chairman. He can argue all he wants to about whether it's a good thing to increase the debt or deficit of this country. What we can't argue about is whether or not it's happening. Reconciliation 1, increase the debt and deficit of this country. Reconciliation 2, increase the debt and deficit of this country. This is reconciliation 3, and guess what? Third time's a charm. They are increasing the debt and deficit of this country once again. And just look at the numbers. It's right here because it's a budget. $60 billion deficit increase for armed services, $13 billion deficit increase for intelligence, $12 billion deficit increase for agriculture, a $10 billion deficit increase for House administration. And again, just look at the language. Don't believe me. Look at the language in the bill. They waive the cut-go provision. The cut-go provision is the fancy Republican rules term that they use for you got to pay for what you do. They waive it. Why waive it? if you don't, unless you're going to increase the debt or deficit. So it's very clear what they're doing.
And I think that the other thing is we were here last week, and they're allocating, they're going to send more money for war. But last week they were unwilling to pay for veterans services, for the benefits that veterans need without a pay for. But they're going to spend this money without a pay for. I think we should prioritize our veterans. And there is no instruction to the Veterans Services Committee, is there?
Our veterans get nothing in this bill.
So our veterans get nothing out of this bill. Shows you where their priorities are. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure-Fernandez. Chairman Arrington, this resolution is about security, funding our armed services to protect our national security, funding our nation's farmers to protect food security, and funding measures to protect election security. What would...
So, hi everybody in the chat. A lot of new people have joined us. Some really interesting comments that I want to read. Uncle Martin, I love your comment. As citizens of the United States, we have to live by a rule, which would be this: physician, heal thyself. Love that statement. I'm a huge believer in this. I had some medical issues like in my late teens and 20s when I was in college, and I kind of learned the hard way. You got to be your own doctor sometimes, because a lot of these doctors, they just want to put you on a medication or just give you an antibiotic every time you go in. And I had to learn the hard way that I need to listen to my body and, figure it out for myself. Thank you, Sarah, so much for the star. Another good one. Hold on. So somebody asked, I think Stay asked about insider trading. So this actually is a hearing to address the insider trading provision. So we'll hear that later in this stream. Just King Cash wrote, just wondering where the F you were when Obama Biden were running the country and making themselves billions. Yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of people that become politicians and end up making a lot of money, sometimes when they're still in office or sometimes when they leave office. It seems to be like a cash cow for people. They become a politician, they gain power, they gain money, status. Most politicians, they end up doing very well after serving their country, that's for sure. Let's see what else. Oh, and then Stay, your comment, it's not a coincidence less than 10% of the money sent to slush funds go to the actual causes. Yes, and that is something that more people should talk about. Oh, and hi, Bruce. I see you here too. Hi, so glad you're here. But I don't know if most people know this, but nonprofits, like charities, like statistically spend 10% or less on the actual cause. And I think that this is something that people really need to talk about more, because you think you're donating to like a foundation or to a cause, and the money that you're donating is going to go to like sick children or cancer research. But when you really look at the bookkeeping for a lot of these nonprofits or foundations, you find that people are giving themselves very high salaries, sometimes fancy trips, fancy vehicles, eating at really fancy restaurants. And when you look at all of the expenses versus what is actually going to the cause, a lot of it is 10% or less. So that's a great point, and that's something that more people should talk about. All right, let's keep going.
Would be the cost if we fail in our constitutional duty to protect America's security?
Madam Chair, I can't imagine if our troops could hear the conversation about pay-fors that every Democrat on this committee has supported supplemental funding for Ukraine, for Taiwan, for Israel, and now they're taking exception with emergency funding for our troops in conflict. Right now, on the front lines, risking their lives. So let me tell you the cost. The cost is our sons and daughters can't be safe in saluting the commander-in-chief and doing their duty. This is bombs, bullets, and battlefield readiness. This is not modernization of the military. The $350 billion request that the president submitted for modernization, that's not what this is. It's emergency supplemental. And if I thought we could work that out on a bipartisan basis, we would do it.
And the number one duty of the federal government.
Provide for the common defense.
Provide for the common defense.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very
Yes, ma'am.
much. Any further questions of our witnesses on this?
So King Cash wrote, "The only president that has lost money is President Trump." Then he said, and I respect your comments. Actually, that is true. So when President Trump was in his first term, his net worth went down. And that's like he said, that's like the first of his kinds. Yeah, like most people, their net worth goes up if they're in office, but his net worth actually went down. And he doesn't take a salary. He just does not take his presidential salary. I think, though, this term, I think his companies are doing pretty good, but I don't know if that's him personally or just the Trump companies. I don't know. I know that the left has made a lot of accusations that President Trump has made a lot of money since being in office this term. I do not know. I haven't investigated that whatsoever. I can't comment on it because I really have no idea.
Panel. Seeing none, we thank you both for coming.
They get shorter every reconciliation, Madam Chair. I think we may be wearing Mr. McGovern down.
You're not.
Don't count on it. Do
Use the
not
heavy
count.
gavel.
Do not count on wearing Mr. McGovern down.
No, I know that about this guy. Thank you for the
Thank
time and
you.
opportunity.
Thank you both for your good work. We appreciate you coming. Thank you,
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
McGovern.
Yep.
I'm not being too lazy. I'm literally hosting a stream and I'm on a treadmill, so I'm not going to investigate it right now. But since you're sitting on your ass in front of a computer screen, DP, why don't you investigate it for us and then report back in the chat? That would be great, right? And yes, these are candy. So my oldest daughter, she's 11, she makes all of these candy bracelets and phone straps and all this keychains, all these cool candy pieces. For me and my friends and her friends. She's really talented. She taught herself, one of her best friends introduced it to her, and then she just started watching YouTube videos and learning how to do it, and she's so good. I mean, like, this is really high quality, so I love wearing her stuff. I actually had to buy like an additional like jewelry box just to put in all of the jewelry that she made for me. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a keychain of my Chihuahua, Josephine. It's so cute. I don't know if they're on a recess right now. Let me see. I'm gonna jump off the treadmill and fast forward it a little bit. I know that this hearing though is like over 5 hours. Hold on one second. Hi, PTS.
let alone anything in a perfect.
Appropriations bills before.
Welcome your testimony.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, members of the Rules Committee, I appreciate very much the opportunity to testify today. I come before you today on H.R. 9770, the Continuing Appropriations Act of 2027. Over the past year, the House Appropriations Committees worked diligently to fulfill our Article 1 duties. Last month, we completed our markup process for fiscal year 2027, reporting all 12 bills out of the full committee by June 24th. It's the earliest date this feat has been accomplished since fiscal year 2020.
did not, I mean, somebody commented about the 10%. That's just like a known statistic. I mean, I would love for you to disprove that. I'm not saying that all charities are like that. There are definitely charities out there that, you know, pay a hefty amount. Some probably pay 100% of what they bring in. But I am saying not all charities, but there are many charities out there that do this. This is like a known statistic. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can certainly look it up. I'm sure you have a smartphone. You're obviously sitting in front of a computer. Look it up. Don't take my word for it. But just because you don't agree with somebody else's point of view or what they're saying, it doesn't mean that they're lying. Like, maybe you guys don't understand what the definition of a lie is. But that's not lying. Because you don't agree with a statement somebody makes does not make them a liar. But for you to call them that just makes you ignorant.
As of today, the full House of Representatives has also passed 3 of these bills across the floor, including the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Bill, the Agricultural, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration Bill, and the Related Agencies Bill, and the National Security, Department of State, and Related Programs Bill. I'm deeply proud of the work that the committee's done thus far, and I'm appreciative of the support we've received from the rest of our colleagues in this chamber. Unfortunately, current circumstances in the Senate make clear that Congress as a whole is unlikely to complete the full appropriations process by the start of the fiscal year. The fact remains that our friends and colleagues across the rotunda have yet to report any appropriations bills out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Despite good faith efforts and reasonable negotiations, political gamesmanship from the left has kept their process at a standstill. While I've not given up hope that we can enact at least some appropriations bills before the start of the fiscal year, I'm also realistic, and I acknowledge the reality on the ground. Congress will need to enact a continuing resolution of some sort prior to September 30th to avoid a government shutdown at the start of the fiscal year 2027. Every member in this room is only too aware of what transpired over the last year. The threat of a shutdown is not only real, it's happened twice in the last 12 months. First, Senator Schumer and Senate Democrats plunged the nation into the longest government shutdown in history last October. Not to be outdone, they then later pushed the Department of Homeland Security into the longest partial shutdown in American history. Both of these shutdowns were unnecessary, reckless, and irresponsible. It would be equally reckless and irresponsible to repeat the same mistake at the end of this fiscal year. Stability is necessary, which is why the House is moving early and taking the step of putting today's bill forward. H.R. 9770, the Continuing Appropriations Act 2027, will put in place a continuing resolution keeping the government open and operating through December 4th of 2026. This will not only allow Congress time to continue our work on full year appropriations bills through regular order, but will also ensure that the government remains open through the November election and into early December. Some may ask why it is necessary that we take this bill up in July. I would simply state that it's never too early to do the right thing. The right thing for this body and for the American people is to make sure that the government remains funded and remains open. Passing this bill now ensures that we, the House, have taken this important step prior to the August district work period. There will be no question about where the House stands. We stand squarely with our constituents who overwhelmingly want to keep the government open and providing services to them. Importantly, today's bill also does not contain a single poison pill rider. It's a clean CR, fully funding our government. This includes our military and defense needs, support for our veterans, and critical services for our constituents like roads, parks, child care, water projects, infrastructure improvements, scientific research, job training, and countless others. I look forward to continuing the FY 2027 appropriations process in the coming months. I thank each of you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay, So 2026, I'm only letting you stay in this chat so you can hear this. So maybe you don't understand how like gross versus net works. You probably have never owned a business, done a 1040C. But it's a little bit deceptive how charities advertise. So, and let me read this to you so it makes sense. So let's say, for example, a charity says we donate 70 cents reaches the needy. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Inside the $70, it could be $20 of it could go to program salaries, 10 to facilities, technology, $5 to travel, 5 to consultants, and only 30 actually gets distributed as grants or foods or medical assistance, etc. So that's why the 70% number that you often hear needs context. Charity Navigator says about 7 out of 10 charities evaluate spent at least 70% of the total expenses on programs. But the program expense ratio isn't 70% of every donated dollar landed. So when you really get into the nitty gritty and you look at the real numbers on the page, let's say a charity brought in $100, but when you subtract everything out of it, marketing, mailers, stamps, salaries, fundraisers, XYZ, out of that $100, $10 actually went to the actual charitable cause. That is what I'm talking about. So they can spin it however they want, but numbers do not lie. Please leave my chat. You're very rude and you're not contributing, but I mean, thanks for the engagement for the last 5 minutes, but I really don't want you in here.
Questions?
Thank you, Chairman Cole. Ranking Member Delora,
Thank you.
you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairwoman Fox and Ranking Member McGovern, members of the committee. Good afternoon to all of you. It's great to be here alongside my friend, Chairman Cole, to discuss the stopgap funding measure released on Friday afternoon. I want to begin by stating clearly and plainly, Democrats do not want a government shutdown. In a perfect world, the months remaining between now and September 30th would be ample time to fund the government on a bipartisan basis through the appropriations process, one bill at a time. However, given Republicans' refusal to write bipartisan bills in either the House or Senate, a continuing resolution is necessary. If I am going to support a continuing resolution, it needs to continue government operations, exclude any poison pills, and it must maintain Congress's constitutional authority over spending decisions. At this time, the continuing resolution released on Friday does not meet that standard. The final Homeland Security bill passed unopposed in April. Unopposed, it was by a voice vote, by including a provision to remove all funding for the Border Patrol. Chairman Coe's bill does not continue that agreement, giving the Trump administration permission to use billions provided by this bill to fund Border Patrol without any substantial reforms to how that agency operates. It's a clear line in the sand that Democrats have drawn for months. In recent weeks, immigration agents have shot and killed residents in Maine and Texas, neither of whom were the target of enforcement operations, highlighting the urgent need for dramatic reforms to protect our communities from further violence. We have also been prevented this measure, hastily put together with little more than a couple of days of thought. That is not the way to govern. The majority has not made time to gather information from our colleagues in the executive branch to identify any potentially critical anticipated needs, let alone anything that may come to light over the next couple of months, especially as we head into the heart of wildfire season and approach hurricane season. We are putting the cart before the horse by considering this legislation without understanding the full scope of what is needed to continue operations through December 4th. As a matter of fact, we have just received a lengthy proposed list of anomalies from the White House. But the process has made no time for us to evaluate these proposals. And this bill does not account for anything that is in these proposals. And the chairman and I both know we go through these with a fine-tooth comb to see what is flexible and what isn't flexible. What are the needs that have to be met? Border Patrol problems aside, Chairman Cole has put forward a plain bill, absent controversial riders, and containing most of the standard authorities we enact in these stopgap measures. That's a welcome change from most of the regular bills that have come to the floor this summer. But we still do not have all of the information that we need. We still have 2 months before the end of the fiscal year and should not rush through an incomplete funding extension. We ought to wait for the information that we need to get it right the first time. This resolution was dropped on us on Friday afternoon without any bipartisan negotiation. Had we been consulted, there are several provisions we would have pushed for to strengthen the measure and to protect congressional prerogatives, including the reversal of a proposed federal rule from the Office of Management and Budget that allows political appointees in the Trump administration to unilaterally block or terminate grant funding if they deem it not sufficiently in line with the president's policy priorities. If we had been brought in before the bill was released, we could be here touting a bipartisan agreement with a plan to fully fund the government for the next fiscal year before the end of this Congress. Instead, we are scrambling to jam through a one-sided stopgap measure 3 days before everyone leaves for the August recess. I'm deeply concerned about what may be attached to this funding measure through the rule that is passed out of this committee. There are some Republicans who have decided that they will not allow any legislation to be considered under a rule unless it includes an extremely partisan measure to restrict voting access for millions of American citizens. Under no circumstances will Democrats support that measure. If the position of my friends across the aisle.
Okay, so this is a hot topic right now, and I feel like it's a little bit crazy. But the Dems, first of all, they never come to any hearings this year that addresses voter fraud. There was a big one last month that we streamed here with Nick Shirley and James O'Keefe, and it was specifically about fraud, specifically voter fraud. Not one Democrat senator went to that hearing. I think that that's a little bit fishy. Why don't they want to be there when they're talking about voter fraud? Isn't that something that's like nonpartisan? Don't we want secure and safe elections? And I don't know if any of you guys have seen the videos on social media of Kamala explaining to us how terrible President Trump is because he wants voter ID during elections. And I just think it's like very crazy that we allow these people to debate this. Like, aside from actually being an illegal immigrant, who wants no voter ID when you go to vote? Don't you want your vote to count? Don't you want to like feel confident that elections do actually matter? Because if they don't, then why do we have them? Then we should just get rid of them. Then I guess we really are a dictatorship or communist. I don't know. If we don't trust our election system, we're not America. That's like something that's very unique and special to the United States of America. That we have free and fair elections. That we, the people, get to vote on who we want representing us and what we want to become laws, right? So if we don't feel confident in our election system and we don't even think that somebody needs voter ID, an ID to vote, what are we doing here? And why do they think that it's like racist to have an ID. Don't you need an ID like everywhere you go? Have you guys ever been to like a foreign country and not brought your ID with you? You have to have an ID everywhere you go. Where do you go where you don't have to have an ID? Everywhere you go in America, for the most part, you need an ID. If you're driving in your car, you need to have your driver's license on you. So I don't understand why the left gives us this dog and pony show that the right is trying to obstruct elections by wanting to require IDs. Like, I mean, I know the real reason. I think that the left they have to cheat. They cannot win unless they cheat. That's what it seems like, right? If you look at that voter map, I think Dave made a couple mugs out of it, and you look at how many counties in 2024 actually voted red, it's like 80% of the country. Really, the only areas that voted blue were like the big urban cities, okay? But most of rural America, which is a huge part of America, and many states, were almost all red, but just like little pockets of like blue cities were blue. So I think that it's more than 50% of our country leans, I don't want to call them fully conservative, but at least towards the middle. And I would say 80% of Americans want free, fair, and legitimate elections, right? So my question to you guys is, like, who's rallying behind the left to encourage this narrative that showing ID when you go to vote is racist or obstruction of justice or whatever other dumb stuff that they say? Like, it doesn't bother me that they say this, because they're clowns. I mean, look at this woman. But the people that get behind them and defend them and stand up for no voter ID, that's what concerns me. Like, is it just illegals that are standing up for that? I mean, I don't know. I guess, like, if you were an illegal alien and you're getting government benefits, you would want to keep voting for these people because you don't want to give up your free benefits. Or, like, if you're somebody that just milks off the system, is forever on, EBT, Section 8 housing, you have no plans to work, you're just going to have more children and live off the government, yeah, okay. Maybe you support that narrative too because you don't want to lose your benefits. But that's not a majority of Americans. That's a small minority. But I guess it's growing since we've allowed so many illegals to come into our country.
Is that they will shut down the government unless we severely restrict American citizens' voting access. I invite them to make that case to the public and see how the public responds in November. At minimum, I cannot support this bill without the inclusion of the technical language regarding the Border Patrol that was agreed on. It was agreed on as a bipartisan, overwhelming voice vote in April, until we are certain that the Republicans will not use this legislation to advance their voter suppression measure. Beyond that, the decision to pursue this path without any bipartisan negotiations gives me serious reservations in moving forward. I'm happy to answer the committee's questions. I thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. DeLauro. Ms. Fishbach, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Chairman Cole, I think you mentioned it in your opening remarks, but I just wanted to check again and make a point of it. How many of the 12 appropriations bills have passed out of your committee?
12, all 12.
And how many have passed the House?
3,
And how many have passed the Senate?
0.
So
And that includes, obviously, out of committee, not just out of the Senate itself, but the Senate Appropriations Committee hasn't gotten a single bill done yet. And I think it's pretty unlikely they're going to get them done between now and September 30th.
And thank you for pointing it out. I wouldn't have asked the question, but not out of committee, not out of the House, or excuse me, out of the Senate. And I mean, the Senate's obviously not taking their duty seriously if they are not even taking up the ones we've sent and doing anything. And so I think this is the only responsible thing to do. Because like you said, they're probably not going to do anything before September 30th, or it's unlikely that they will. And I think that to avoid a shutdown and allow them more opportunity to get their work done and take it seriously, I think this is a necessary thing that we need to do.
So somebody in the chat wrote, Obama has a Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah, that's true. Obama has a Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel Awards, like, it's a pretty big deal. It's like a big deal to be awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. But did you also know that the medication that was demonized during COVID lockdowns, ivermectin, also has won a Nobel Prize? It won a Nobel Prize because it effectively helped to clear up diseases like malaria. And it's actually one of the safest medications out there right now. But during COVID, it was demonized, and people that were taking it had a hard time getting it, number one. But remember, Joe Rogan had COVID, took ivermectin, reported that I think he got rid of his COVID within a couple days, and one of the things he did was take ivermectin. Well, he was totally demonized and shamed all over the mainstream media. They said he was taking, a horse pill, a horse dewormer or whatever. But that's like a Nobel award-winning medication. So I don't understand why we weren't able to use it during COVID. Could it be because if any other medications treated COVID effectively, then the vaccine wouldn't have been rolled out and afforded all of the special stipulations that it had, right? Did it win a Nobel for COVID? No, it didn't win for COVID, but it won a Nobel Prize for being effective. And when they were making the claims against ivermectin, they were saying that it was dangerous, an ineffective medication, and it was for horses. And that is all not true. But I invite you to go back a week or two when we streamed the Fauci hearing, because that was really interesting. And then I also have a couple streams that I did from Ron Johnson, Senator Ron Johnson. He hosted it, all about the nefarious things that have gone on because of the COVID vaccine and the research that they did, that it's actually dangerous and it's harmful to people. And those are Senate hearings, so you can go on to Senate.org. You don't have to believe me. Just go to Senate.org and watch the streams for yourself, because Senator Johnson has done tons of research on this topic, and you should really be in the know. You should know if you injected the COVID vax, what you put in your body, what side effects that people have been having, what the true death rate was for people that took that vaccine. It's important that you know and educate yourself.
And so I appreciate you bringing it forward, and it's a pretty simple resolution, pretty simple piece of legislation, and so I think that it's easy to understand what's going on in it, and so I don't think we need to have 3 months to digest what's going on in this. I understand it, and I think that everybody else does too, and so I appreciate you bringing it forward, and I appreciate the fact that you're taking the responsible approach and making sure that we are able to insist the Senate get their work done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fishbach. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Yeah, no, let me just, first of all, say that I want to remind my colleagues that the Senate is controlled by the Republican Party, and Susan Collins is the chair of the Appropriations Committee over there, so maybe there's a need for some change. And I would, I don't want to prolong this. I have respect for both the chairman and the ranking member. It just seems to me, based on what Ms. DeLauro just said, that maybe we could have reached a bipartisan agreement if there was a bipartisan back and forth before this was announced, and maybe we still can get to that at some point. But I don't really have any questions. I just wish that this was more of a bipartisan process, and maybe everything would be a little bit different right now. But it is what it is, and I thank you both for being here, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would tell you, it seems to me that the Senate's actually controlled by the parliamentarian, not the Republicans over there. But I just, Mr. Cole, I'm looking through the things, I mean,
Tell that to John Sue.
I don't see any reason for anybody to necessarily to object to this. I, like you, don't have confidence that bills are going to make it through the House and the Senate prior to the end of the fiscal year. We don't have that many work days until then, to be honest with you. But I haven't seen the Senate take much action on anything yet. And so I think it's kind of smart to go ahead and take the potential chaos of a shutdown off of the table because of the amount of damage that it does to the American citizens. And while I think a shutdown probably works to the advantage of the Democrats politically because of the way the press operates and their messaging apparatus, is very damaging to the American citizens in our country. And so I intend to vote for it. If you have any other comments that you'd like to make as the chair, you're welcome to it. Other than that, Madam Chair, I'm prepared to vote in favor of the continuing resolution.
Mr. Cole.
All I'd point out is that, look, there's nothing in the bill to be against. It just simply is a clean CR. And I've always had the philosophy, I don't vote on bills because of what's not in them. I vote against them or for them on the basis of what is in them. And there's nothing in here that's remotely controversial. And look, we've been through the two longest shutdowns in American history, the longest shutdown of full government, which Senator Schumer and Senate Democrats sprung on us. And to say they control by the Republicans, simply not true because of the filibuster. And that's just the reality. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want the final part of the campaign this year to be fought over a government shutdown. Frankly, I don't think people on either side of the partisan divide should want that. They should want to be fighting on the issues. I promise you this, if we shut down the government come September 30th, that will be the issue that dominates politics in the next few years. We're just trying to take that off the table for both sides, make sure that there's certainty in funding the government, that we don't have another one of these situations where we have lines at airports because TSA agents aren't being paid for or any of those sorts of things. Just fund the essential things. We'll have the election. Things can be sorted out. We come back after that. If the Senate were moving, if they had made as much progress as we have, then again, I'd be happy to hope that would happen, but I just don't see the time for it. So let's remove the possibility of a government shutdown now through the election, have enough time when we finish that election to come back and make some appropriate decisions. In the meantime, we want to keep working on appropriations bills. I hope we keep bringing them to the floor. I know the House has lots of things to consider, but we're going to continue to try and move the regular process along. But we want to take away the possibility of a shutdown between now and the election because, again, we've seen that happen twice in this Congress already, generated by the Senate, and I'm not willing to risk a third time if we can avoid that.
There's a difference between having a majority and being in control. You yield back, Mr. Scott.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. I hate to say it, but it feels like this continuing resolution is an admission of failure not by our brilliant appropriators, but by House Republican leadership. They're willing to give up one of Congress's most fundamental powers and duties in order to avoid another potential political loss just before the election. They're asking us to give a blank check to this administration because they can't manage either their Republican caucus or to negotiate actual bipartisan funding bills. So I think it's an insult to the Appropriations Committee because I know they continue to do good work even under duress, but it's a failure of Congress to be doing this months before the end of the year. And it also robs the House of the ability to direct funding to our districts where we know we need it. It robs every member of the ability to highlight, whether community health centers or local infrastructure, or we've been able to get additional resources for schools and libraries. All that goes out the window with a continuing resolution. So I'm not in favor of this. I think it is an admission of failure by the Republican leadership. I was struck, Ranking Member Deloria, about something you said about the continuation of funding without guardrails for ICE. At a time when, in the last week to 10 days, we've seen 2 more killings of people on American streets under very, very questionable circumstances, when we're still seeing a failure to have clear rules about use of force, all the money that has been sent to ICE amidst promises that they would be deploying body cams for people to wear to remove some of these questions. We're not seeing that, but now we're supposed to give them more money. Is that what this bill would do?
Let me be clear. First of all, I just want to say, there would have been no need to go down a road where there are difficulties here. As I said, some of the provisions that are in the bill are fine, which we could all agree to. But the issue is that the Republican continuing resolution, it does not include all of the sections of the fiscal year 2026 Homeland Security Appropriations Act. What it allows you, not with regard to ICE, because what they said is that there was no money that goes to ICE, but they have failed to put in what the agreement was, the funding agreement, PL 119-86, zeroed out funding for Border Patrol. They did it in 2 ways. This Republican CR omits that prohibition that guaranteed 0 for Border Patrol. And so that gives the administration the flexibility to fund Border Patrol with the money that has been provided to CBP, because we did provide money to CBP to carry out its functions in a strong way. And no one has said, and by the way, so that you understand, we discovered that, we being the Democrats discovered this technical error, and it was an error. I believe that was an error, but nevertheless, we then formulated language in the way to fix it so we could move forward. That was denied because when the bill came forward, we noticed that problem, we drafted the correction. When it came forward on Saturday, Republicans did not make the technical corrections in the bill that was introduced on Saturday. So they made a choice to allow the CR to potentially fund Border Patrol, no reforms as we have fought for over the last several months. And quite frankly, as I say, this piece was passed on the floor of the House, bipartisan, in April by virtue of a voice vote. So why not fix it? So this would allow them to potentially fund Border Patrol on top of the $90.7 billion that CBP has already received through reconciliation. And that's largely for Border Patrol operations. This could have been corrected. And so that is it. And I got all the citations and what bill it is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it omits this language, and I don't think that we can, what is it? Was it Ronald Reagan who said trust but verify? We have no way of verifying that this money would not be used.
Kind of like we have no way of verifying our elections and the results of our elections if we don't require voter ID or signatures, or we allow election day to span for 2 weeks. We have no way to verify if the election is real, right? So yeah, I agree with her. We need to verify. We absolutely need to verify things. I'm so glad that she's on board with verifying things. So the first thing they should do is pass the bill to require voter ID. That way we can actually verify who's voting and if the votes are real. Great idea, lady.
When this bill was produced,
Yes.
you checked it over.
But
And
we
in the
drafted
process
language.
of verifying that it didn't have anything that was different than what
Yeah.
had been previously agreed to, you found that there were things that were different, and when you asked for corrections, they didn't
We
happen.
drafted the language,
That's not good faith negotiation.
so.
Thank you.
There we
I
are.
yield
Thank
back.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Griffith, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, if the Senate doesn't act, if we don't get these appropriations bills passed, these sections that the ranking member has just mentioned would not be in the government shutdown period either, would they?
Correct.
And if we do the CR now, which I will tell you, I think is the responsible thing to do based on past actions on the Senate side, and it's not just the filibuster, it's the modern filibuster that's been changed. You know, if you went to the filibuster before the 70s, you wouldn't have these issues. But nonetheless, but if we take these actions and then through negotiations with the House and the Senate and these things that the ranking member wants, which have been agreed to by the House previously, that would all be in the appropriations bill, most likely, would it not?
Correct.
So, and there's no reason why if we pass a CR to take effect, should we not get appropriations bills, and we do pass appropriations bills, then the CR would not go into effect. Is that also correct?
That's also correct.
Now, let me ask you this, because I don't know the answer. If we approve, let's say the House and the Senate get together and we approve 6 of the 12 or so appropriations bills, does the CR only go into effect for the remaining areas that weren't approved?
That's also correct. If we actually passed bills and they were signed into law, those would supersede a CR.
So this is kind of like buying that life insurance policy when you have children. You hope you aren't going to die, but if you do, you want them taken care of. And am I correct that this is kind of like saying, okay, we're going to have this policy here. We hope we get it all done by September 30th. But if we don't, while members are distracted in October going off campaigning or trying to campaign for both the House and the Senate, then we don't have to worry about the government shutting down and not doing the things that the American people wanted to do. Is that my understanding?
That is correct.
And has it been your experience in your district, as it has been in mine, that of all the issues we fight about up here, having the government shut down and having people worrying about whether or not there's going to be, you know, this, that, or the other, whether the money for disaster relief is going to actually get to where it needs to be, whether or not the Blue Ridge Parkway is going to be open in your district, may not be asking about the Blue Ridge Parkway, but similar functions like that, these are the things that people care about the most. Isn't that true?
In my view, it is.
And so what we're doing here is we're trying to do the responsible thing, recognizing that in the past there have been issues and problems. We're just trying to make sure that government moves smoothly as we move forward, and then we can negotiate all those things and we can get these appropriations bills passed. That's fabulous, is it not?
I think it's the prudent thing to do, given what's happened literally within the last year. I mean, the longest government shutdown in history, followed by the longest partial government shutdown in history. There's nothing in this bill that's remotely offensive to anyone. It just simply continues things and make sure we can have an election, sort these things out, but not shut down the government with all the risk to public safety, to the functioning of the economy, that those things done. And again, we've watched the Democratic, contingent in the Senate do that twice already. So making sure it doesn't happen a third time, we think is the prudent thing to do.
Well, and it's prudent notwithstanding, I mean, it doesn't matter who does what, it just makes sure that if we're negotiating points and we're arguing for our points vehemently and respectfully, but we can't get an agreement by September 30th, the American people don't have to pay the price.
That's exactly the effort here.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate
you.
your work. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith, for always getting to the heart of the matter. Ms. Leisure Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I would note that in the short hearing that we've had so far, we've had Republicans mention repeatedly over and over and over again, shut down, shut down, shut down.
I'm not talking about.
And I've heard the ranking member talk about, can we have a conversation about a CR so that we can work out matters? Because a CR is best like an appropriations. I always like it when the two of you come before us and say, well, we worked things out, right? We didn't each get what we wanted, but we worked things out. And what I'm hearing today is we were giving this bill, we had very little time to look at, and we haven't been able to work things out. And is that a good summary of kind of what we're seeing here?
I mean, the fact is, like I said at the outset, I'm not going to get into, everybody's view is about the government shutdown. All I can just say, it took you 79 days to come to a conclusion I made the very first day, is to say, let's separate out border security and ICE and fund everybody else. It took you 79 days to want to do that, to pay these.
Why does the left not want us to have law enforcement and border control? Why? Why is that such a hot topic? Why don't they think it's important for our country to have safe borders? I think that's a big deal. I think that's why a lot of people actually did vote for Trump, because we don't want all of these illegal people just flooding our country. It does not benefit us in any way. And we know when Biden was president, 10 million plus illegals came into our country. And if they went to sanctuary cities, they were literally given like tons of benefits. They were given EBT cards. They were given debit cards with money on it. They were able to stay at like fancy hotels in New York City. This affects us. This affects everybody in America, especially if you work and you pay taxes. This affects us. And then this has a domino effect. And we're seeing that effect today with inflation that is through the roof, and prices, not just on a couple things, but prices on everything have gone up significantly in America. It's really difficult for a lot of Americans to live comfortably anymore. And I mean, you can blame, whatever president you want. I know people go back and forth blaming Trump and Biden and then back to Obama and whatever. Fine, whatever. But I really think that a lot of the inflation that we're seeing absolutely has to do with the COVID lockdowns. But I do think it also has to do with allowing so many illegals to come to our country and literally just gifting them free money and free health care and free transportation and free lodging. That's just my opinion. But I'm sure that, I know that there's facts out there to support that, but I think that has a big part of what we're seeing today.
People, you kept talking about it, but you didn't. That aside, we could come to an agreement here. Why are we not following what we said we would do in April of 2026 with regard to the funding of ICE, which is there, and the technical error? I don't believe anybody did this with malice aforethought. I think it was a technical error, but what is contemplated is not providing that fix and saying zero, as is in the bill for this effort. That is not a problem. By the way, I might just add, look, I've talked about the Senate a lot, and what they do or what they don't know. But I do know that the chair and the ranking member there, Chair Collins and Ranking Member Murray, have talked about coming to a bipartisan conclusion on where we go to a CR, which is not the case on the House side. And again, look, we received this moments ago. How many pages is this? Some 20 pages of anomalies from the White House, which have not been reviewed or gone through about what that means. For instance, the OMB proposal for Section 8, you need language to address funding shortfalls and to maintain the current services for public housing agencies. Without the anomaly, public housing authorities would have insufficient funds to maintain assistance for tens of thousands of households. Shouldn't we take the time to find out whether or not we can get this right on the first go-round? All we're simply asking for is to take a look at the technical fix that's needed. Let's make sure that the appropriations bill is not going to be loaded down with the SAVE Act, as we saw with the State and Foreign Operations bill. And to talk about not a clean CR, that certainly wouldn't be a clean CR. We have no guarantees there of what comes out of the committee here, and we could get to a bipartisan resolve of this if we were to move forward in good faith. It defies imagination that we have now 2 months to go. We're going with half ideas and not full knowledge and understanding of what needs to go into a continuing resolution. And so happy to continuing to talk about it. I will say one last word. You know, people talk about, well, let's wait and see. You know, very clearly, there hasn't been any level of trust built up by this administration. Let's take a look at rescissions. Let's take a look at impoundments. Let's take a look at reconciliation. Let's take a look at a rule now at OMB says no longer are we going to provide grants across all agencies. Not only they're not going to be based on merit or peer reviewed with regard to science, but they're going to go through a filter, a political filter with political appointees who know jack about what is in some of these bills. And they will make the decision as to where federal dollars are going to go. Both sides of the aisle should be so offended by that because we come to a conclusion. We win some, we lose some, but we come to a conclusion on a bipartisan basis.
So you look at this lovely blue or purple-haired representative, and she's been here for a while. And then you have to think for yourself, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I see why they don't want voter ID, why they don't want, like, safe elections. Because they have to cheat in order to put this, whatever you want to call her, here. Who's voting for this? Seriously. Who votes for this every couple years? You're telling me that there's no voter fraud going on in her state, that this woman is normal looking, that this is the face of a congresswoman that you keep electing over and over again. There's no election interference whatsoever, okay? Because I look at her and I think, oh, okay, this is why they don't want to pass those acts. This is why they don't want voter ID, because they're cooking the books.
Of what our constituents have said that they want these dollars for, and we pass the bills, bicameral, bipartisan. President signs the bill, and then it gets reversed? Hell no. That cannot be the case. On both sides of the aisle, we cannot go forward. And as I said, we need some assurances here, we need the fix, and we need to be guaranteed that the SAVE Act is not going to be part of this effort. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. I look forward to having a conclusion that has more bipartisan, I look forward to your bipartisan conversations moving forward. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. I don't see anyone else here available to ask any questions of our witnesses. I thank you all very much for coming and making your positions perfectly clear. Thank you very much, and you're excused. I now welcome our next panel Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli from the House Administration Committee. Well, I'm still looking for Chairman Stile.
I'm sure Mr. Morelli could represent both sides.
So someone made the comment about 41% of Black Americans receive benefits from the government. I looked that up. So according to the 2023 census, and I just specifically wanted to look at under 65, so it could very well be higher, because I don't think we should count Medicare, but I can check the Medicaid numbers for over 65. But Medicaid, CHIP, SNAP, SSI, TANF, WIC, housing assistance, energy assistance, and other programs, according to the U.S. Census, and again, this is 2023, so I don't know what the 2026 number, but it's 31%. But in 2022, 38% of non-Hispanic Black children received SNAP alone in 2022. So that 41% number could very well be accurate, because I'm only seeing statistics from 2023.
I now welcome our next panel, Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli from the House Administration Committee. Your full statements will be submitted for the record, and we ask you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Stile, I welcome your testimony.
Chair Fox, thanks for having me in. Ranking Member McGovern, members of the committee, thanks for inviting me to testify today in support of H.R. 7008, the Stop Insider Trading Act. I also want to thank Speaker Johnson, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, and their teams for their commitment to getting this common sense bill to the floor. Also want to thank a handful of our colleagues who are at the front and center of this debate, including your colleague on this committee, Chip Roy, as well as Brian Fitzpatrick, Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, and others for their feedback and support throughout the process. Before the committee today is a Rules Committee print, which combines the Stop Insider Trading Act with another common sense measure the committee has advanced, the Voter ID Act. Together, these bills will clean up Congress and strengthen election integrity. I'll begin by discussing the second section first, which addresses lawmaker stock trading. This section ensures that lawmakers cannot use their position to profit off insider information they may garner while serving in Congress. Under the bill, members of Congress, their spouses, their dependent children are prohibited from purchasing securities issued by publicly traded companies. To sell a stock, members are required to provide advance public disclosure at least 7 days in advance to the clerk of the House or the Secretary of the Senate. The penalties associated with violations are steep. Members will be assessed a fine equal to $2,000 or 10% of the value of the transaction, whichever is greater. In addition, violators must forfeit any realized gains from a profitable sale. The legislation, I believe, is critical to restoring public trust in this institution. Nearly 15 years ago, Congress passed the Stock Act, which required lawmakers to publicly disclose stock trades. However, the disclosure rules lack detail and can be filed a month after the transaction. This, coupled with increased attention to members' trades, in particular by social media accounts, has fueled public frustration. I believe it's time we just stop allowing members to buy new stock. Doing so removes the appearance of impropriety altogether. Americans should be confident that lawmakers are working for them, not for their stock portfolios. Someone wants to go trade stocks for a living, there's a place to do that. It's called Wall Street. If you're here in Washington, you should be working on behalf of the American people. The reforms in the Stop Insider Trading Act are common sense, and I think that's actually why they're so overwhelmingly popular. Now let me turn to the third section of the bill, the voter ID section. Madam Chair, you may have seen the big news over the weekend. The never-ending pasta bowl is back at Olive Garden. I used to work at Olive Garden, so this hit close to home. But to safeguard the integrity of their pasta program, Olive Garden, as you may have seen, implemented photo ID requirements. However, in jurisdictions across the country, from Illinois and California and Minnesota, an individual can go to the polls on Election Day and cast a ballot without providing confirmation of their identity. In other words, Madam Chair, we're protecting our breadsticks more than our ballots in jurisdictions across this country. Our Voter ID Act implements common sense election integrity measures to require voters to show photo ID when casting a ballot in federal elections. This is another common sense policy, and again, I think that's why it's so popular with American people. 24 states require photo ID to vote. This bill makes that standard and takes it nationwide. Today, we have a real opportunity to clean up Washington and increase Americans' confidence in our election. I encourage all committee members to support this legislation. I look forward to your questions. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Stile. Ranking Member Morelli, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, to you and to Ranking Member McGovern and to all my esteemed colleagues. It's always nice to be back in the Rules Committee, so thanks for the opportunity to be here and address
And
the bill.
former member of the committee.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, of course, and most importantly. Madam Chair, as I've said repeatedly, House Democrats strongly support a stock trading ban for members of Congress. We also support a ban on the President, the Vice President, and federal judicial officers from trading individual stock as well. But none of that is before us today. Rather, this bill is a crude combination of two completely unrelated bills, the so-called Stop Insider Trading Act and the Voter ID Act, the latter of which is already a crude reformulation of at least three other failed Republican voter suppression proposals. If Republicans were serious about ending stock trading by government officials, they would not have attached a subsection of the Save America Act as a poison pill. And if Republicans were serious about protecting elections, they would not have gutted CISA's election security unit. They would actually fund the work of election workers across the country instead of indulging the president's almost childlike obsession with the 2020 election. Instead, they echo his criticisms of state and local election administrators, both Republicans and Democrats, who patriotically and without favor do the unglamorous work of securing our democracy. Turning to the bill before us, I'll address both measures individually. Neither of them deserves passage. First, the so-called Stop Insider Trading Act. This bill would, in fact, allow members of Congress to continue to own and trade individual stocks. The bill would let members of Congress keep every single share of stock they currently own. The bill would allow members to liquidate their holdings at any time, profiting off years of ballooning investment portfolios. There is no divestiture required under this bill. And crucially, the bill does nothing to rein in the unprecedented, absurd, and deeply offensive corruption currently taking place in the White House. Donald Trump promised a booming economy and no new wars. Instead, He's enriched himself by billions and billions of dollars, picking winners and losers in the stock market while pocketing the profits. I welcome any chance for us to consider legislation to end insider trading in Washington, including at the White House. But again, that is not what this bill does. So we'll have to wait even longer for real progress. And when House Democrats regain gavels in November after this bill inevitably and justifiably fails to become law, and we finally ban stock trading by Congress, by the President, and by the Supreme Court. Now, to address the second fully distinct part of this bill, Voter ID Act, I have to say, in the words supposedly of Yogi Berra, this feels like deja vu all over again. We will all remember the long list of failures. Republicans attempted to pass the SAVE Act, then the SAVE Act Part 2 once again, then the Save America Act, and now the Voter ID Act. All these bills have the same purposes and the same origins. They aim to eviscerate mail voting, needlessly burden millions of eligible American voters, and further President Trump's obsession with undermining our elections in aid of Republican Party priorities and Republican politicians, not to further the aims of this republic, not to assist our democracy, but to do this in a partisan way. The show your papers regimen and regime passed and proposed in this latest iteration would be more restrictive than any in the country currently in use anywhere, including in states like Texas and Florida, those liberal bastions of voting rights. In fact, several Republican officials have appropriately criticized provisions of this bill as burdensome and potentially illegal. Republican Ohio Governor DeWine recently vetoed an anti-vote by mail bill almost identical to this one, noting its restrictions would, quote, would not discourage fraud, would not add any real security, and would create an additional and significant burden for Ohioans to vote by mail. As I've said before, I support voter identification, but despite its name, the Voter ID Act is not a voter identification bill, it's a voter suppression act. And I might just say, and my dear friend and colleague who I often agree with, Chairman Stile, but equating an endless pasta bowl at a chain Italian restaurant with the fundamental constitutional right to vote, I think indicates.
Okay, wait, you guys. So this is the second person that brought up the Olive Garden all-you-can-eat breadsticks thing. What did I miss? What was brought up that they're comparing voter ID with Olive Garden? I think Olive Garden may require, like, you need to show your ID before getting, like, unlimited breadsticks. But I didn't know that that was, like, a real thing that they continuously have been quoting. Like, have you guys heard this? Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm so glad that I chose this hearing to stream because these guys are so interesting. Like, these are not the normal congressmen that we usually stream on this channel or that anybody really streams for that part. Like, I never see the MSM, giving clips of these types of hearings, but these guys are pretty funny. Like, I've been very entertained the last couple hours. Like, I'm really happy that we're watching this together. But has anybody else heard that? Like, what is going on? What is this comparison? Voter ID and showing your driver's license at Olive Garden to get unlimited breadsticks. Is that a thing? Maybe it is in, like, northern states. Like, I just went to Olive Garden a few weeks ago, and my best friend, I think she did get the all-you-can-eat breadsticks. So I gotta ask her, though. I don't remember them looking at her ID, but maybe they did because she did get, like, a glass of wine, so maybe I thought that she had to show her ID because of that, but maybe they needed to see her ID to get the unlimited breadsticks. This is so ridiculous. So ridiculous. But if I'm missing something, please tell me what you've heard.
Indicates how seriously we're taking this matter. In our markup, committee Democrats offered a reasonable voter identification provision as an amendment to this bill. And to show good faith, we even retained a grant-making provision in the original text. Not only did Republicans reject our amendment, but they stripped out the grant-making provision in advance of today's rule. That's right. Republicans removed the only slightly redeemable quality of this otherwise very bad bill. Simultaneously, in a different vehicle, Republicans would instruct the Committee on House Administration to increase the deficit by $10 billion to impose SAVE Act restrictions that have died in the Senate. So I'll tell you this much. It's notable the majority has agreed to $10 billion as a new baseline for federal support for election administrators. I'm going to remind people of that, and I look forward to a more effective, more secure use for that level of funding over the next year. But in the face of these two destructive bills, I would ask my colleagues to show some courage, oppose these foolish measures, and with that, I thank you for the time, and I'll yield back.
Thank you both for your comments.
Okay. I think we're getting to the bottom of it. Oh, by the way, PTSD demon, you're talking about Antifa. I just want to remind everybody that according to the SLPC, that people like Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece are terrorists, domestic terrorists, because she believes that we're all human beings. We're not, defined by our race. So she's a domestic terrorist, but Antifa, that organization is not domestic terrorists, according to them. And they're, a Dem funded, or they fund the Dems. They're part of Act Blue. But they don't think that Antifa is a hate group or domestic terrorism, because actually Antifa isn't even an organization or a group. Antifa is a concept. So I just want to remind you that. But anyways, Spacey says, unlimited pasta bowls are a limited time. You can buy a pasta pass and get it every day as long as it goes, but you have to show your ID to redeem it. And I just wanted to back that up. So the Republicans keep making the Olive Garden comparison, and the Democrats have responded to it. But in a nutshell, the comparison started after Olive Garden brought back its $100 never-ending pasta pass in July of this year. The pass is personalized and non-transferable, and Olive Garden requires the person using it to show a valid photo ID, matching the name on the pass. So Republicans seized on that, and the House Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, said, quote, "For God's sakes, you can't get pasta at Olive Garden without a picture ID. Why not be able to show a picture ID to vote?" So, yeah, that's the context behind that. That's great. That's really, really good, guys.
Chairman Stile, I did mention that the Olive Garden has now instituted a requirement for a vote for ID in my opening remarks. Our friends across the aisle want to sow division by claiming that voter ID requirements for voters suppress voting. Did the largest study on this question conducted by the nonpartisan National Bureau of Economic Research, which tracked 1.6 billion data points over an 8-year period, confirm that voter ID laws have no statistically measurable negative impact on voter participation?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that's a really important point. You need an ID to board an airplane, open a bank account. I obviously make light hard of the Olive Garden requiring photo ID. There's events that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle host that require a photo ID to get in. And so the notion that somehow photo identification for voting is a barrier. It's actually the statistics just don't support that. If you look at my home state of Wisconsin, we have a reasonably robust photo ID bill. I think there's room for improvement. This law does that. But what we see is continued high voter participation, and I encourage high voter participation. I think that's a good thing. And I think actually what we will see by requiring photo identification is people's confidence in our elections to increase. And the statistics really show us when people have confidence in their elections, they're actually more likely to participate. There's a lot of data that came out of the state of Georgia after Georgia passed their state election integrity legislation. And so I'm actually of the belief that we will see voter participation increase.
May I?
Mr. Morelli?
Yeah, just respond to it. I don't think that we face such profound differences in belief around voter ID requirements. My state doesn't have a photo ID. We do signature analysis, as is done in many states. But let's just assume for a moment that we could get together and decide that we have a national standard. I would say that, for instance, in North Carolina, I know you're well acquainted with it, you can register to vote and vote with a driver's license, even if it's expired for a year or less, a public assistance program ID card, a student ID or staff ID from a list of over 7,000 institutions. That would not be the case under this. This would be a much more restrictive voter ID law that you attempt to pass than is in the state of North Carolina, in the state of South Carolina, in the state of Florida, in the state of Texas. As I said, places that have placed a premium on voter ID and support this, but the bill before the House that you're considering today is far more restrictive, and many of those IDs, those forms of ID, would no longer be allowed under federal law. I would urge you to take a look at that.
Well, I wasn't going to bring up North Carolina, but since you have brought up North Carolina, I would say to you that we passed a law in the state, the Republicans passed a law in the state of North Carolina with no Democrat support to have voter ID. That was challenged in court by a Democrat member of our Supreme Court. Stopped that from going through till it was approved. We passed a constitutional amendment supported by 61% of the people in the state. That was challenged by Democrats. We then passed another law. We finally, after about 10 years of Democrats fighting us tooth and nail in North Carolina to keep from having a voter ID. All that people say to me all the time is, why do the Democrats fight voter ID? Could it be that they want to cheat? People do not understand why. It's an 80%, I believe, 82% approval rating that we have ID to vote. It is an extraordinarily popular idea. It took us over 10 years in North Carolina to get it passed over the objections of Democrats who constantly didn't want it. Mr. McGovern,
I'm sorry.
I yield back. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Well, thank you. I'll let the gentleman answer if he.
Well, yeah, the only thing I would say, and I appreciate, is that the question is, first of all, voting is not a privilege. It's a right in America. And I know the president always refers to it as a privilege. It's not. Maybe drinking beer is a privilege. Maybe getting a bottomless bowl of pasta is a privilege. They're not rights. This is a right. All of the other rights flow from it. So you want to make sure, I think, and I think many people would agree.
Well, he's wrong because, well, he's right. It is a right, but it's only a right to a legal American citizen. And there are certain people that are legal citizens and cannot vote because they have felonies. So it's only a right for certain people that live in this country. And we need to protect that right for all the people that qualify, because it is worthless. It means nothing if anybody can go vote. Right? Anybody could just fly into our country and go into the voting polls, don't show ID or whatever, and vote for whoever they want. It's imperative that we figure out a way to make this right. And it's just so messed up. Gosh, everything our government does, it just gets so jumbled and messed up, and it becomes such a huge mess. It's like, how do you even solve these issues? If anybody has really looked into what is going on with our voting systems from state to state, even county to county, it's like a disaster. It really is. We hear bits and pieces from the media, but a lot of the stuff that gets reported is just not true whatsoever. It's a nightmare. I don't know how they're going to fix it. Just like I really don't know how they're going to fix healthcare, because they have royally messed that up in our country. It's beyond repair what they have done to our healthcare system. We need like a do-over. And, you know, when I was younger, I saw that movie Fight Club. And I love that movie. I was such a big Ed Norton and Brad Pitt fan. I just thought that was like such a cool, amazing movie. I think I was like, I don't know, middle school, high school when it came out. But now as I'm older, working in the system for 3 decades, like I really understand the message of that movie so much more now as an adult. And when I think about like our healthcare system, I just imagine the scene at the end where they're just, you know, blowing up all the banks and the credit card companies. And it's like, we need to do that again with some other institutions that we have. We just need a do-over. We need to like get rid of them and just start over, because it's so unfixable the way that it's been messed up. I don't have the solution. I'm sure I could probably figure it out. I'm sure a lot of you guys could figure it out, because a lot of you have common sense and education and integrity, and you want it to work. But I don't think that a lot of our politicians actually want things to work. I feel like they profit from the chaos. And we're seeing this in real time when we watch these hearings together. We see how inefficient things are beyond repair. And like they're not getting along, they're arguing over nonsense, and it just feels like they just want it to stay chaotic. They do not want to fix it. And they really don't care about anything. They don't care about us as the people. They don't care if we have a government shutdown. They don't care that, you know, our troops could be literally in active war. But, we don't need to pay them. They don't care, because when we shut down the government, Congress and the Senate, they still get their salaries. They don't miss a beat. They have amazing health care through the federal government. So our problems aren't their problems. They do not care.
That as long as you're in a position to provide ID that proves who you are, why is it such a restrictive list? Why are student IDs no longer allowed? Virtually every state that has some form of photo ID allows the state university to issue a student ID.
Right.
This bill wouldn't allow it.
Right, which is, well, let me.
Why wouldn't this bill allow it? Because a student ID is completely different than a government-issued ID. A student ID, anybody can be a student. I went to college at American University. I purposely went there because American had one of the largest international populations of colleges in the country. And I really wanted to be around international students. I even lived in the international dorm my first year. It was really cool. Like, a lot of the kids I went to school with were from all over the world, and some of them were like ambassadors' children, diplomats' children, and I got to go to school with them, and it was very cool, okay? But they're not U.S. citizens. Just because they have an American University campus ID card, that does not mean that they're American citizens. They're American students. But saying that a university ID is sufficient to vote, no, it's not sufficient enough to vote, because it does not prove that you are a citizen of the United States. So that's why this bill has that wording in it, okay? Like they do things purposefully, and it's almost ridiculous. These comebacks that the Dems are giving why they don't like it. But the bottom line is they just need to cheat. They need to cheat. They want to cheat. They'll never win unless they cheat. And you can't convince me otherwise anymore. The fact that they do not show up at any of the hearings about voter fraud, and the fact that they are so adamant about not passing any laws to help secure our elections, I feel like that is evidence that they need to cheat to win. They cannot win legitimately. They have to cheat, and that's why they're so against voter ID, and they're so against laws that help safeguard our elections. If you'd like to try to prove me wrong, I invite you to send it in the chat.
Just, again, say for the record that voting is a constitutional right. It's not a lunch special. You have a constitutional right to vote. You don't have
I can't read this. TDA Graham wrote, Trump supporters cannot admit how much they have failed us, the military and the world. Well, first of all, I don't know what that has anything to do with voter ID. That's number one. Number two, admit what? What have we failed at? What has our military failed at? From my point of view, I feel like our military is better than ever. Have you ever met any veterans? Have you ever met anybody actively in the military? I have quite a few friends that are actively in the military. They're amazing. They do a great job. They're very dedicated to our country. Dave was in the Army. He's a veteran. So I don't know what you're talking about. Please share with us, though, because I would like to know what I'm not admitting. I'd like to know what Trump supporters have failed at in regards to our military and the world. I really want to know. Make voter ID free, then no issue. Okay, I don't understand. I don't understand that. What do you mean voter ID needs to be free? Oh, okay, whatever. I mean, unfortunately, depending on your state, you have to pay to get a driver's license. You have to pay to register your vehicle, and you have to renew your driver's license, yearly or every other year or whatever. Like, sorry, that's part of living in America. We pay a lot of fees. We pay a lot for registrations and renewals and insurance, and that's just part of being an American. But most people have ID, and it's not that much money. Maybe like skip a Starbucks run, and then you can afford like an ID.
Have a constitutional right to a breadstick or a bowl of pasta. And if your right to vote is denied, you have lost your voice in our government. So, I mean, these analogies are happy to yield to the gentleman.
Thank you. We also have a right bear arms, but we have to show an ID to buy a gun.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can argue, that's a whole separate topic. Madam Chair, it is a whole separate topic. No, happy said it. But I just want to say on the issue of voting rights and voting integrity, my Republican colleagues in this administration have absolutely no.
Oh my God. I'm glad that you guys didn't hear my rant, but I basically said that not everybody that's an American citizen should necessarily have the right to vote. That back in the day, if you voted in America, you were a landowner. Maybe that's something that we need to investigate. I also said that there's some people out there, I'm not saying me, I don't agree with this, but there are people that don't feel that women should vote. That a household should have one vote. And that's it, like it used to be back in the day. I'm not saying that I agree with that. I'm just saying that this is something that has been thrown out there by people. I think that voting is very important. And I don't think that somebody with no skin in the game that depends on government assistance, not somebody disabled, not a veteran, I'm not talking about somebody that served our country, but somebody that knows how to work the system and has no plans to ever be an able-bodied working person and just wants to live on government assistance forever, I don't think that it's fair that they get to vote. It's not. But I also feel like it's unfair that we don't allow certain felons to vote. Because I feel like if you committed a crime and you did your time, that shouldn't follow you around the rest of your life. If you did your time, you repented, now, you're an upstanding citizen, you were punished, you served your time, I think that we need to re-examine that because I don't think that they should be punished for the rest of their lives. I don't have any say in this, these are just my opinions, but I think that we do need to revisit in our country who actually has the right to vote.
Standing. I mean, I listened to this president's speech last week. It's 40 minutes of my life I'll never get back. It was crazy. It was insane. Conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory, and all of my Republican colleagues here just kind of went along to get along. Well, whatever the president says, I get it. He can't stand the fact that he lost the 2020 election. I know his ego is fragile, but we're just going to let him say whatever he wants and let him.
I think our president should say whatever he wants. I think the worst thing that happened to us is when Twitter shut his account down. Oh my gosh. That was a sad day. I used to love going on Twitter, wake up first thing in the morning and just see what Donald Trump tweeted out. Those were magical days. Magical. And I think that Donald Trump should be able to say whatever he wants. He should say whatever he wants. That is his right. That is his freedom of speech. So I think that he should say whatever he wants and not be censored.
Create doubt in the minds of the American people that somehow our elections are not safe. I actually read the garbage that he said he released. All the intelligence basically is saying that there's no evidence that there's been any kind of foreign interference or in our elections. That kind of the tool that foreign governments have is to try to create the impression that they may have influenced our election as a way to discourage people from voting. Well, we don't have to worry about Russia or China or anybody else. Donald Trump's doing it all by himself, all because his ego can't stand the fact.
This guy is a literal clown and an idiot. And apparently he does not like to read facts because Donald Trump had a hearing, not a hearing, he gave a speech, last month or whatever. And he gave us all where we could go to look at what came out about the 2020 election. WhiteHouse.gov, and they also talked about the 2016 election. WhiteHouse.gov, you can see the documents for yourself. There was various types of interference in our election. This is not like a conspiracy. We know that this is true. And it's been done in a few different ways. So this is true. And anybody can go to whitehouse.gov and they can read those documents. You know, if you don't know what you're reading, you can put it through ChatGPT and it'll interpret it for you. But I don't know why these people say these things when they have the resources. Like, isn't that their job? Their job, especially if some of them are attorneys, like, they should be reading the documents. But they actually have the audacity to come out here knowing that they're being filmed also for all the world to see on YouTube. And they can just say things that are completely false. What happened to integrity? I wish that we could bring back integrity. That's what's really missing, really from both sides, not just the Dems. But there's a lot of Republicans that they don't have integrity anymore. We need to bring that back.
That he lost an election. And now my Republican friends are bending over backwards trying to do whatever they can to make it more difficult for people to vote. Chairman Stile, the introduced version of your voter ID bill included a grant program to help states provide eligible voters with free voter ID cards. Your committee reported a version of your bill that also included this grant program. The bill published on the Rules Committee website also included this grant program. Then, for some reason, a new version was published that deleted this grant program. Why?
So there's different ways that we want to make sure all individuals can receive an ID. Under Supreme Court.
I just want to know why the grant program was deleted.
I was getting there.
Okay,
if
all
you'll
right.
give me the opportunity to respond. There are multiple ways we want to make sure that everyone can receive an ID. We're also going through a reconciliation process. As you know, this committee had a conversation, I believe, on that earlier today. There are funds now available in the Committee on House Administration, something that we're looking at. But under the Supreme Court, everyone is allowed to get an ID if it is so determined that it's needed, as it will be under this legislation.
But you could have done it in this bill today.
Yeah, there's different avenues of how we're looking.
I guess, I mean, so without this grant program, if a state does not provide IDs for free, people without the specific forms of ID required by your bill will have to pay in order to simply vote.
I don't know that.
And I guess the question is, who asked you, I want to know, like, who asked you to delete this grant program?
I actually, if I can comment, I don't think your previous statement's actually accurate. I think as we look at the Supreme Court jurisprudence, if it is required, states will be required to provide the ID. The second question that you asked is, we're looking at ways to make sure
Who
that
asked you
these.
to delete the grant program? Because it was.
I've had
in the
broad
original bill,
conversations.
It was reported to your committee. It was in the, it was in the bill that was published on the Rules Committee website. So somebody just recently had asked you to take this out. I'm just curious, who was it? Was it the Speaker? Was it Trump? Was it who?
No, there are broad conversations about how we ultimately have all of these pieces of the puzzle work. We're also working in real time on the reconciliation piece.
But why? Why was it taken out? I'm just trying to understand why it was taken out. You had it in your original bill. It was in the bill that you reported out of your committee. It was in the bill published on the Rules website. So, like, now it's not there. And so I'm just trying to understand, like, why? There's got to be a reason why. Somebody asked you to do it. So I just want to know who asked you to take it out, and I want to know why.
Yeah, we're always looking at ways to improve and
So
finesse
who asked you
bills,
to
and this
take
is
it out?
part of it. It's part of a broader conversation.
Can you give us like a name so we can follow up with somebody to find out, like, what you know, like, why was, I mean, who's having this broader conversation?
Republicans in the House of Representatives.
Okay, so, all right. So you asked, I'm reading your letter that you sent to the Rules Committee. And you're asking the Rules Committee for a closed rule on this bill, meaning that you don't want any amendments to be even considered. Yet you got a chance to amend this bill at the last minute by taking out the grant program. Why do you think your colleagues don't deserve the same opportunity?
I mean, obviously, that'll be a decision for you here at the Rules Committee as to whether or not amendments are allowed.
Usually when we get a letter like this from a chair, it says that they ask the Rules Committee for an appropriate rule. You actually are very specific, saying that you request the committee grant a closed rule.
Yeah, I'm of the belief that the bill is ready to be brought to the floor and will pass.
But you, again, this was in the bill that you introduced, that was reported out of your committee, that was, published on the Rules Committee website. it mysteriously gets taken out. You can't tell us who asked you to take it out or why it's taken out. And yet you kind of do something that most chairs don't do, who usually ask for an appropriate rule. You ask for a closed rule, I guess so that nobody could try to put it back in or to amend this in any other way. I just don't understand why your colleagues don't deserve the same opportunity that you had to be able to remove something that, again, made it through your committee. And I got to tell you, it just seems to me that this is just another example of all of you guys playing politics. And the reason why this matters is that these grants could have made it so that people without these ideas could get them. I mean, that was the whole point of this. And it's gone. So I don't even know what the hell you guys are trying to do, but it's certainly not trying to preserve the integrity of elections or to get more people to vote. You're trying to make it so that people will be frustrated and can't vote.
What is frustrating about pulling out your license? Am I missing something? Why is that? Why do Democrats think that that is so frustrating? That's such a major hurdle to overcome, to go in your wallet and show them your ID. Why is that a hurdle? If you can't do that, if you think that that's a burden, that going into your wallet or going into your pocket and showing a poll worker your ID is burdensome, you probably shouldn't vote. You should not vote. Because that's easy. It's not a big deal. It's such a lame, so lame, such a lame argument. So ridiculous.
And again, I think that goes against what this country is about. Mr. Morelli, you've submitted a substitute amendment to this legislation. Can you explain your amendment to us and what advantages it has over Mr. Stiles' bill?
Yeah, so there's
Yeah, Zippy, like I said before, if you can't afford an ID, you shouldn't vote. And also, too, if you've never paid taxes and you're on government assistance your entire life, maybe you shouldn't vote either. Maybe it's not fair that you get a say in where our tax money goes when you don't contribute, you just consume. I think we need to relook at that. Because if there legitimately are people out there in America, American citizens, that showing an ID is too burdensome for them or too expensive for them to have a legitimate government ID, it's just too expensive, they can't afford it, I don't think that they should be voting. I do not think that they should vote.
actually, because there's multiple pieces of the bill that we would make better, but I also, just to your earlier point about amendments, we would make amendments, and I would like to see an amendment that that we revert to at least the portion of the bill that had the grant making. So my amendment would restore the grants. I think it was the only redeemable part of this bill would be to give resources to local election administrators. They're doing hard work. They're doing it without support from the federal government. And now this bill takes away what I consider the only redeemable part of the bill. They need support. They need support whether or not we add all these additional requirements on them or not. But at least it would make the bill better. I mean, it's a bad bill, but it would make it better to be able to provide some resources. And, the other thing that we should note is that they would be administered by the Elections Advisory Commission and the EAC, or the Elections Assistance Commission, and the EAC provides resources and support for state and local election administrators. So the whole point, and the president is now fired, so there are no members of the commission at all, fired all the remaining ones. So the commissioners don't exist. The professional staff does. They can continue to do grant making, but I think it says worlds about how the president views this. He continues to try to take guardrails off of the election system so that people will lose confidence. And I appreciate your comments about the president's speech the other night. I mean, the president's the one who took apart and eliminated the election security unit of CISA. And then he talks about the challenges facing our local administrators and vulnerabilities. Well, you're the one who's making it worse, not better. So the grants would be one. And then we have additional amendments as it relates to the program that relates to the other part of the bill that's entirely, as it relates to stock trading.
I'm just
All right, guys, it's getting late over here on the East Coast, so I'm going to stop here for tonight. We're going to pick this stream up Friday night. I'm not going to be around tomorrow. It's my youngest little girl's birthday tomorrow. She's turning 7, so I'll be celebrating that, but please tune in Friday. I'll try to make it interesting. Sometimes Fridays are not the best night for these live streams, but I'm brainstorming ways to make it interesting and get more people here on Friday. But I hope everybody has a great night. Thank you so much for joining me. Great chat as always. Please make sure to check out my bio. There's new membership levels. I have a new email address. If you guys need anything, please email me. I actually check my emails and I answer them. And I would love to hear from you and what your ideas are, and what committees you guys want to stream. But anyways, thanks again. And also there is a link because I have a newsletter now too. So make sure you sign up for that as well. And if you haven't, please subscribe. All right. Have a great night, everybody. I'll see everyone back here Friday night.